What's up, YouTube world? Welcome back to my channel, Israel on Foot. I'm Steve, the tour guide, and I returned to the Mount of Olives, which was featured as one of the hills in last week's episode that was named after a verse in Psalm 125. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so Yahweh surrounds his people from this time forth and forevermore. Now, I'm not just returning to the Mount of Olives in this episode, I'm also returning to the book of Psalms. Why? Because the book of Psalms is a repository, an incredible wealth of information concerning the theology of an institution in ancient Israel called the kingship. Now, for those of you that are literate in the Bible, you read the Bible regularly, you'll recall that in the beginning, God didn't even want Israel to have a human king, because he was the king, and he would simply just raise prophets and judges to speak on his behalf. But this didn't suffice for the people of Israel, and we're told that they approached the final judge in the book of Judges, Samuel, and they clamored and said, "Samuel, give us a king so that we'll be like all the other nations. We'll have a king that marches before us into battle." And we're told that this grieved Samuel's heart, because Samuel knew that this wasn't God's perfect will for the nation. And God returned to Samuel word, saying to him, "Samuel, look, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. Give them what they want, but with the caveat that it's not going to be ideal. This king is going to strong-arm them. In fact, the monarchy as an institution is going to strong-arm them. Kings will tax their people. The kings will draft their sons into monumental building projects or have them run before his chariots. It's not all going to be peaches and cream, if you will." But they clamored all the more, and therefore Samuel in the end capitulated, and he gave them a king. He gave them Saul. Now, what I'm about to tell you guys is going to shock some of you. Saul was not just the first king of Israel. He was the first Messiah. That's right, Messiah, the Hebrew Mashiach. And I have no one less than King David to tell me so. In 1 Samuel chapter 24, David refers to Saul 3 times as God's Mashiach, or Messiah. Your Bible probably says anointed, but just know that the Hebrew that underpins that English word anointed is none other than Messiah. But Steve, are you kidding me? You're calling Saul the Messiah? He was far from being a model king, let alone a model citizen. Steve, what are you up to? Well, I'm not up to anything. I'm just going back to the genesis of the word Messiah, and what it essentially meant back in the beginning was God's elected king. In other words, the king that God has elected in his sovereign choice to rule over his people Israel. And that first king that he gave them was Saul. And it has nothing to do with Saul's character or lack thereof. The fact that he was God's choice as king makes him the Messiah. Now, I'm going to take a quantum leap to King David and to our psalm that's at the center of our attention for this visit this week, and that's Psalm chapter 2, which I'm going to read to you, and then I'm going to explain it to you by using the site behind me. All right, Psalm chapter 2, and as I read it, just take in this one-of-a-kind, spectacular view. "Why do the nations rage and the people plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against Yahweh and his Messiah, saying, 'Let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us.' He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord holds him in derision, and then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury, saying, 'As for me, I've set my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will tell of the decree. Yahweh said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron, and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Now therefore, O kings, be wise, be warned, O rulers of the earth. Serve Yahweh with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. Wow, check out that view. All right, Steve, tell us what's going on. Well, do you remember last week's episode focused on that hill that's called by two names, Mount Zion and Mount Moriah? Remember, they're one and the same. Now, Psalm chapter 2, the psalm that I just read, encapsulates the amazing theology that unites these three things: Yahweh, the God of Israel, the Messiah, the King of Israel, and Mount Zion, his holy hill. Now let's consider how these three were related to one another. As we look at Mount Zion directly ahead of us, I want to draw your attention to that bend in the highway, to the left of which descends the city of David, inhabiting the site of the former Canaanite city of Jebus. And now in the middle of the frame is this barren area, in the center of which is this stone wall slanting into Mount Zion itself, on top of which were the palaces of David and his successors. And the psalm that I just read to you, Psalm chapter 2, we believe was chanted not only on the day of David's enthronement, but on the day of the enthronements of his successors as well. And according to the theology of the psalm, when each of these kings were enthroned, on the day of their enthronement, they were adopted as the begotten Son of God to rule on behalf of their father Yahweh, the true King of Israel, who was enthroned in the Temple of Solomon that one time stood on the spot of that Islamic shrine today, the Dome of the Rock. Yahweh sat enthroned between the wings of the cherubim in the Holy of Holies, but because he had no bodily or physical presence among his people, he would anoint or Messiah certain individuals to rule on his behalf as vice regents, if you will, whose own palaces were further down the hill, right there, back where our stone wall is. And their job was twofold. They were to judge righteously among the community of Yahweh, the people of Israel, as well as to wage war on behalf of Yahweh against his enemies. And who are the enemies of Yahweh? According to the book of Psalms and the prophets, well, none other than the enemies of Israel itself, those that sought her harm and even to destroy her. Well, folks, there you have it, the essence of the theology concerning the ancient institution of the monarchy. What became of that institution? Well, you can read about it in 4 books of the Hebrew Bible, they being the 2 books of Kings and the 2 books of Chronicles, which chronicle the descent of the monarchy into utter corruption and even murder. And this in turn would cause longing and yearning for an individual who would come from the line of David and restore the kingdom of Israel to its former state of primacy in relation to its enemies, as well as morality and peace within the community itself. And we'll call that person the eschatological Messiah. Christians, of course, believe that Jesus fulfilled that role, that he is that eschatological Messiah. And of course, observant Jews believe that that individual is still to come. And that's a subject for now that I'm going to defer to a future episode, if not a few episodes. But for now, we have to bring this episode, episode 2, to a wrap. If you liked the video, please remember to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and perhaps you'll even consider becoming a monthly patron by visiting the link below the video to my Patreon page. Well, folks, it's shalom for now, and I look forward to seeing you at the next episode, which is going to be filmed from the palace of King David. And I think I'm going to focus on the story of David and Bathsheba. Bye-bye.